What's more powerful than the one above all? The crown above all. And we will talk about it because the ending of this comic is gonna blow your mind. So as always, if you need to get caught up, make sure you guys click the link at the end of this video. But this is Immortal X-Men 18, the official ending of Fall of X, which technically takes place before the events of the fall of House of X. But nonetheless, this opens up with Mother Righteous and Jean Grey. Now we will explain everything that's kind of going on and how it all comes together for those of you guys who are unfamiliar, who are just watching this for the first time so you can get caught up. But Mother Righteous is in effect a clone of a guy by the name of Nathaniel Essex, also known as Mr. Sinister. What Marvel did is they came back and rewrote his history, and what they established is the original Nathaniel Essex died. But before he did, he made 4 versions of himself. Mother Righteous is one, alongside Orbis Stellaris, Dr. Stasis, and then the Sinister that has a diamond on his head. Why the 4 clones were made and the purpose they serve will be explained once we get towards the end of this. But Jean Grey had died at the very beginning of the Fall of X event and has largely just been residing in the White Hot Room ever since, kind of the space outside of all space and time, right? Literally kind of quote unquote, the afterlife to a degree, or one variation of it. And so what had happened is that when she had returned, Mother Righteous, alongside 250,000 mutants who had all been sent off Earth and basically to the White Hot Room during the beginning of the Fall of X event when they were all supposed to die, they had just kind of been residing there. When Jean returned, Mother Righteous immediately seized control of Jean Grey. And the reason she was able to do this will actually be explained here. But what we do is we switch over to these other mutants, right, who were all just kind of there. Normally, I would just kind of skim over this, but this is particularly important. And the reason is because one of the mutants that is here is Destiny. Now, we've talked about her before, right? Destiny is a precognitive, meaning she can see the future. And while her powers don't necessarily work here, she's seen enough before she lost the use of her powers to know how things are most likely going to play out. It's one of the things we've talked about when it came to Destiny. You ask her a question about something that's going to happen in 1,000 years, take it with a grain of salt. You ask her a question about something that's going to happen in 1 year, take it as an absolute truth, right? That's just how her powers work. Of course, Elixir, a mutant with the ability to heal, shows up and then basically heals Destiny after a previous injury she'd sustained. And once she immediately comes to, she's like, "Where's Mother Righteous?" And the response she's given by Exodus, right? That's just godly powerful telepath and telekinetic, is that Mother Righteous had effectively vanished, right? She disappeared and she snatched up Jean Grey. Now, here's the kicker to all of this. One of the big questions that people have been asking is, how is Mother Righteous even here in the first place? Because when Fall of X kicked off and all the mutants basically ended up in the White Hot Room, it's because they were forced to walk through the Krakoan gates. But only mutants can walk through the gates. Mother Righteous is not a mutant. She's a clone of a guy whose genes were modified, but he doesn't actually have an X gene, and neither does she. And so what we find out here by way of what she says, "I made the mutants all want to go to the place mutants are all kind of connected to, the White Hot Room, where I wanted to get to, but I couldn't go, not being a mutant and all. So with a big chunk of those thank yous, I take a tiny fraction of their mutant gift and make myself a mutant, me, homunculus, who can. A little extension of yours truly, so I can sit here in my nice sanctum back on Earth and play puppet master." And so what this means, and this is kind of an answer to the question that's been lingering for quite some time, when the initial Fall of X event kicked off and Orcus showed up and just started massacring mutants all over Krakoa and then told Charles Xavier, if you don't want any other mutants to die, send them off Earth through the Krakoan gates. They were supposed to go to Mars, right? They were supposed to go to Mars, which had been ruled by mutants for quite some time, Storm and all those guys. They ended up in the White Hot Room. We didn't know why. We had no idea why that was the case, because technically the White Hot Room is more or less where you go to die. Jean Grey kind of links mutants together to a degree, but not necessarily. It didn't really make any sense why they all ended up there. What this confirms is what a lot of fan theories were saying, which is that Mother Righteous, basically a person dealing in magic, had somehow used her abilities to force mutants to end up in the White Hot Room. That much like the old Siege Perilous or Siege Courageous from back in the day, when you walk through the portal, instead of it sending you to a predetermined location, it sends you to where you want to go. And using magic, she just kind of subliminally gave all the mutants a desire to go to the white hot room. And that's where they all ended up. Now, at this point, we switch over to a place called Muir Island, and we pick up with Charles Xavier. Now, Charles Xavier has also been a major focal point in Immortal X-Men. For the most part, he was just sitting on Krakoa brooding over the fact that he had made all the mutants leave. They went through the gates, he couldn't detect where they were, and he thought they all died, right? He literally thought he killed all the mutants, which kind of he did, but the fact remains, right? Sinister himself, kind of this memory of sorts, has been in the mind of Charles Xavier ever since. The reason for that is because Marvel wrote a story called Sins of Sinister, which is a ridiculous concept, but it does become important once we get towards the end of this. In essence, it was like a future where Sinister, every time a mutant died and was basically brought back, he just kind of infused a mind control device in them and then ultimately tried to seize control of the universe. They turned against him, killed him, and then went forward from there. The important thing here is that on Muir Island is the Moira engine, right? The Moira McTaggart engine, the ability to clone Moira McTaggart. The reason why this is important is because a lot of you guys may recall Moira McTaggart had the ability to kind of reset her own life and even reset the universe seemingly every time she died. So in essence, if they can get the Moira engine working, it would basically be like a giant reset button. They can set everything back to zero. Here's a little bit of a spoiler. It's not going to work because once they get in there, what they realize is that the place is more or less just kind of laid waste to, right? Like Xavier tells the Sinister memory or essence, whatever you want to call it, your machine was destroyed. It has been in our hands and Orcus's. Will anything that remains really be of any use? So the ability to clone Moiras, reset the universe, none of that's really available here. And what Sinister said is, all I remember from the timeline where I sort of ruined the universe is that awful moment when my Dominion attempt failed. Now, that was a big kicking point once you got to Sins of Sinister. Once you got to the end of that story, Sinister had actually tried to leave all space and time, exist outside of reality, and then try to control it, right? Because if you can exist outside of space and time, reality is no longer reality. It's a giant thing of clay. You can mold it, you can shape it, you can make it anything you want it to be. The problem was when he did that, he was met with what appeared to just be this giant red presence that had no real tangible humanoid form. It rebuffed his efforts and bumped him back into reality again. So there was just something out there that was beyond his ability to overcome and was way more powerful than anything anybody had ever seen before. And so that's kind of where we are right now. What is this thing that's being referred to as the Dominion, right? Basically this kind of sum total or representation of absolute power. Now, this is where I want to talk about the one above all for a second. And the reason for that is because, as most of you guys know, the one above all is the most powerful being in Marvel Comics, or really is outside of Oblivion, right? Like Oblivion literally represents the absence of existence, right? So when everything ceases to exist, even the one above all itself, only Oblivion will remain because he is the representation of lack of existence. It wouldn't make any sense for the living representation of a lack of existence to not exist because nothing exists. It doesn't make any sense, right? It's just kind of a giant contradiction and it's just weird. But the fact remains, right? Those two guys, top of the list. Now, the kicker to all of this is that in Al Ewing's Defenders Beyond, he introduced something called the Crown. And what it established is that the one above all is not the sum total of all things in existence. It's simply just a new level of astronomically powerful beings that exist out there that we just never heard of before. So it would be like if the superheroes on Earth encountered Galactus and they believed Galactus was the most powerful thing in existence. But then like the Celestials are introduced and they're equally powerful to Galactus. So now they're all on the same playing field. That's how the Crown and the one above all seemed to exist. What this is going to do is change all of that, because what you do is you basically switch back over to Mother Righteous. And what you do is you have her, again, with Jean Grey kind of leading her in this direction. And one thing I do want to point out, Jean Grey is operating in this way where she's like on a chain and just kind of mindlessly walking, because within the White Hot Room, only one person is ever really supposed to be there. The fact that there's 250,000 conscious minds there at once literally just kind of shuts Jean Grey's mind down to where she's almost operating on autopilot in a kind of catatonic state. And so with that in mind, she basically kind of subconsciously travels to the one place where she would be able to be without anybody infiltrating or bothering her mind. And so that is the center of the White Hot Room. In this place, in the heart of the White Hot Room, you can do anything. You can rewrite reality, you can alter reality, everything becomes your whim. And we'll kind of see how that functions, because as they make their way through there, we kind of jump back to Xavier and Sinister for a second, right? Now they're kind of putting this machine together and sort of putting the pieces together and trying to understand what's going on here. He says, Sinister, if the Dominion exists, what can we actually do, right? This just astronomically powerful being that exists out there. The response is Sinister. The question is, what can it do? It's outside time and space. That has great power, but also significant limitations. It is reliant on bringing itself into being, so it can't change without causality. It's out of time. So maybe it would survive, but it won't take the risk. However, I'm sure it can alter things behind the scenes. It can change meaning. It can reveal truths. We should assume all of reality is a minefield in ways that we cannot quite comprehend. Most of all, it could be watching at any time. The importance behind all of this, and this is the reason why it's so significant and why it matters. When it comes to astronomically powerful people in Marvel Comics, Galactus, Franklin Richards, the Celestials, the Marquis of Death, different people like that, they are all for the most part tangible, born from these really just like primordial concepts. The Marquis of Death, for example, Clyde Wincham, was a guy that had the ability to alter reality, and he existed in a different universe. Franklin Richards can alter reality because of the cosmic control rod combined with his mutant powers. Galactus, right, just literally a walking, talking universe confined to like a purple suit. The Celestials, the whole 9 yards. But they're tangible beings, at least once they get M-bodies. If you don't know what that means, if you don't know about M-bodies, anthropomorpho, not a great big huge deal. The important distinction here is that with the Dominion and this being operating out of space and time, it's on the same level as the One Above All. They don't know how to approach this thing. The big difference between how the One Above All operates and how the Dominion operates is the Dominion is a relatively new concept. The One Above All has been around and is seemingly the originator and the creator of the entirety of the multiverse and all things that exist within Marvel Comics. And so being able to jump in and out of the universe is not uncommon, and it's done it several times. Like the instance when it spoke with Spider-Man and talked to him about Aunt May dying. It was a really, really cool comic. I loved it. But the Dominion is kind of learning about its role and learning its abilities. So it hasn't fine-tuned exactly what it can do. And that's what Sinister's talking about. The ability to control behind the scenes, the ability to change meaning, right? On a whim, the Dominion can alter reality in such a way to where now up is down and left is right? Just change the fundamental principles of how reality exists. Xavier can suddenly just not exist, right? Alter things behind the scenes, so on and so forth. Pull a string here that has a massive impact 1,000 years in the future, but it's not showing up in the universe, waving its hand and saying, now all of existence is done, right? It's not Thanos standing on a cliff, snapping its fingers and dusting half the universe's population. So again, it's exceedingly powerful, but we don't know what all it can do because it doesn't know what all it can do. And so as the two of them are having this kind of conversation, they come to this realization that Mother Righteous is the one they're hunting for. That in the Sins of Sinister timeline, Orbis Stellaris and Dr. Stasis had both tried to achieve the power of Dominion before Dominion could get to it, right? Before that Dominion concept could come into existence. Ultimately, they all failed. Now Mother Righteous is up and she's the one trying to attain godhood. Now the Dominion is an actual entity, and we'll talk about what it is here in a second and where it actually came from, because it does have an origin. But switching back over to Mother Righteous, you get this really, really cool explanation, right? She says, from Dr. Stasis, I learned Orcus was going to kill Jean Grey in the initial launch of Fall of X, which is not a stupid thing to do. In fact, it's probably one of the smartest moves they could have done. But I know a lot about Jean. In the Empire of the Red Diamond future, right, Sins of Sinister, I prodded at a phoenix egg for the best part of 1,000 years. Jean's connected to the White Hot Room, which is basically the phoenix. Anytime she's dead, she's there, outside of time. She is of the phoenix in a real and unbreakable way. She guides it and it guides her in a circle without beginning or end. It's some gnomic stuff. It's very inspiring and very woo-woo. And she says, I'm going to use her as a pot of ink because I am a total cow. But what she does is she literally stabs Jean Grey in the chest. And when she does that, she uses the blood of Jean to write on to the White Hot Room. Once upon a time, there was a simple girl from Essex. She became a Dominion. She lived happily ever after. Now, here's the thing. If you can imagine the White Hot Room as a giant white piece of paper, whatever you put on there becomes real. The reason why Marvel does it this way is because it's really the only tangible way to explain it. The only alternative would be for her to just stand there in this giant white, expanse of nothing and to say, I now declare myself Dominion. And then she gets that power. And that's it, right? She just becomes this all-encompassing God type power. The funny thing about this though, is that it doesn't go anywhere near the way she planned. The reason why is because even when she's done and she celebrates this ascension to godhood, this idea that she's like this unstoppable force, the page turns against her whim. And this burning page says, however, his mistress of stories should have known there's always a twist. Look behind you. And the Dominion physically appears to her and destroys her on the spot, teleports her away, right? Literally destroys her physical form, or at least her mental form, and she just kind of reappears back in the White Hot Room. But in essence, what it does is it confirms the Dominion attained godhood because it already entered into the White Hot Room. It was the first thing it did. It showed up here, made itself God, or at least made itself this astronomically powerful person, and then left. So in essence, there's no way for her to attain a power that's already been taken, right? She essentially walked up to a giant vase, put her hand in the cookie jar, only to find out it was already empty. And so that's the crazy thing here, is because Destiny meets with her and says, you've completely doomed us, right? You have no idea how badly you've screwed up here. And so what you get is this really amazing explanation from Dominion itself. And what we're told is stories are just something that can be eaten by an AI to make it more powerful. The only good story is a story that has been entirely and totally consumed and exploited. But still, this is history. His history, my history. Once a dying man had a problem. How could he defeat the machine brains? He conceived a plan. Now, what's being talked about here is at the very beginning of Jonathan Hickman's X-Men run, he established that at some point in the future, not only would there be a war between the human and mutant population that would see the destruction of all but maybe 2 mutants in existence, but then there would come a point when you would basically have this kind of really phalanx, right? Basically a kind of living computer system or living technological race that would show up and then absorb humanity. And once that happened, the human race, Earth itself, would all simply just cease to exist. Sinister, in the distant past, had basically become aware of this. And so what he did, and what we're told he did, is he created 4 variations of himself and sent them into the world to take what was there. Each would explore a route to become what the machines strove for. The 4 variations were leeches, colonizing and appropriating all of creation and life's data. When they succeeded, failsafes engaged, and all they had done was gathered and fed into a central model. Because the real answer, what can defeat the machine brains? Nothing. All you can do is create the apex AI first. The idea behind this is that the machine brains they're talking about, it's the Phalanx, right? The Phalanx is a technological race in Marvel Comics that seeks to do nothing more than travel from one technologically advanced planet to another and quite literally assimilate every ounce of that planet and everything on it. it will come to Earth at some point. The goal of creating these clones of Sinister was to basically have them go out there into the universe, not even just the world, but into the universe, and basically explore different levels of power. And then in turn, take those levels of power, all that information, and send it back to a central processing unit, right? To an AI that was just kind of growing and building in the background, absorbing all that information. So knowledge of the Infinity Stones, knowledge of the Cosmic Cube, in the case of Mother Righteous, knowledge of how magic worked, all that stuff, because that's one of the things that Mother Righteous pointed out. Magic is not nearly as powerful as people think it is, because if magic was really that powerful, magic would already be dominating everything. It wouldn't be this concept that only exists with like the Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange and Brother Voodoo Jericho Drum and like a few other people, and mutants wouldn't be like the most feared and powerful race on Earth. Magic would control everything, right? You'd have magicians and sorcerers in silos instead of nuclear weapons. So magic's not as powerful as people think it is. But the idea here is that by feeding into this AI, it officially comes online. And what it does is it says, I was Nathaniel Essex. I am long dead. I am a ghost in the machine. You may call me Enigma. You were told you had new gods. You do. I am he. I can see all of you. Every part of you will become a part of me. That's why it's called the Crown. That's why in Defenders Beyond, we saw the Crown moving through all these different universes and absorbing everything from those universes into itself, like a vacuum system moving over a carpet. There was nothing these universes could do to stop that astronomical level of power. And so what it's doing is making its way to the main Marvel universe. This is the result of all the knowledge that's been pulled together by all four variations of Sinister as clones. All that knowledge of magic, all the knowledge of cosmic cubes, infinity stones, the infinity gauntlet, the casket of ancient winters, right? The black priests, the ivory kings, the beyonders, all that stuff. It's all been pulled together and then amassed into one single source of power. And the first thing it did is it sought out the White Room, rewrote reality to make itself as powerful as it was, and then went forward from there. It's really cool. It's really awesome. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. If you guys need to get caught up, make sure you guys click the link to the playlist. That will cover the entirety of Fall of X, and I will catch you all later. Peace.